Good Saturday morning, everyone. Welcome back to Weather on the Go, all your weather coverage. In today's weather forecast, I will be covering a brilliant weekend of weather with mild temperatures and quiet weather conditions across the country. Then next week, a big storm takes shape across the country with a snowstorm, an ice storm, and a severe weather side possible. And then we also look at the long range weather pattern through the middle of March in this video. If you guys don't know, the countdown is on to my 1 year of being on YouTube. We have 11 more days until my 1 year of being on YouTube is on March 1st of 2023. So if you want to support the channel, hit the subscribe button down below so you don't miss out on any of my weather forecast updates every single morning at 9 a.m. and also to support the channel with my 1 year of being on YouTube coming up in just 11 days. So hit the subscribe button down below, everyone, and the notification bell to get all of my daily weather forecast updates on this channel. But looking ahead here through this weekend, we have the zonal flow of the jet stream all across the United States from the Pacific West all the way across the Atlantic East as well. So we have mainly a zonal flow from west to east across the United States. And whenever you see that, we do usually have some quiet weather conditions. And that is exactly what we see going through the day today, with the exception of a few higher elevation snow showers up here into the Pacific Northwest, up into Washington State and Idaho, and also into western Montana. But the rest of us will be very quiet with high pressure dominating through the day today and through the day on Sunday, again, with the exception of a few higher elevation snow showers up across the northern Rockies and the northern plains through the day on Sunday. You can see with those snow showers, the total snowfall accumulation through this weekend into early next week will be minimal, but higher elevations here, we could see over a foot of snow. So definitely some nice snowfall for the ski resorts here up across the northern Rockies. But more importantly for us this weekend, get outside, do some errands outside, do some yard work, anything that you have to do, because we definitely have some nice warm temperatures here for much of the eastern 2/3 of the country on Saturday today. Temperatures will be in the 40s and 50s down here across much of the southeast. But going into the day on Sunday, February 19th, we'll warm up in a big way, especially across the southern plains and the Gulf Coast here. We're warming up into the 70s as far north as Oklahoma, Texas, getting into Louisiana, even some 80s down here being felt in central and southern Florida through the day on Sunday. But if you guys are with me still on this video, press the like button. It's the thumbs up button down below the video. It helps to get all of this weather information out to as many people as possible on YouTube. So definitely press the like button down below, everyone. But going through next week, like I mentioned before, we have another big storm taking shape across much of the country here. And this could be a pretty potent storm as well. On Tuesday, February 21st, we have an elongated trough up here across southern Canada and the northern United States. But as we go into late week time frame on Thursday the 23rd, we have the trough really digging in, a positively tilted trough out west, bringing very cold conditions out here to California and much of the Intermountain West. Meanwhile, to the east, we have that southeast ridge taking shape as well that we've seen all winter long, and that will continue as we head through late next week. And looking at this with the temperatures on Tuesday, we have the warmer temperatures to the south, the colder temperatures up here to the north. But as we go into Wednesday, we'll start to tighten up the temperature gradient across especially the middle of the country here. We have below zero high temperatures on up into Montana, the Dakotas, Wyoming, and even farther north into southern Canada. But meanwhile, to the south here, we're going to be dealing with that southeast ridge. So temperatures will be in the 60s and 70s all the way through the Ohio Valley, the Tennessee Valley, and much of the southeast. And that actually carries us into Thursday as well, and much of these areas into the Ohio Valley could be surging through the 60s and in the 70s. We even could be breaking out into the lower 80s down here into the Gulf Coast states by the time we get to late next week on Thursday. And just look at the temperature gradient here. Parts of central Illinois could be in the middle 50s on Thursday, February 23rd, but just up there toward the Chicagoland area, we'll barely get above freezing by that time frame. So just an incredible setup with our temperatures. And whenever you see a setup like that, you have to worry about a very powerful storm moving through. And this storm is going to be sending a powerful jet stream through the middle of the country with that positively tilted trough, picking up all of that Pacific moisture and the Gulf of Mexico moisture as well through next week. This is your precipitable water anomalies, and you can see in the darker greens and the blue shaded colors, those are 3 to 4 standard deviations above climatology here for the moisture out there next week. So definitely a moisture laden system as we head through the week next week. So looking at the map and what this could look like starting on Tuesday, February 21st, we'll see the system move in across the Pacific Northwest and the northern plains first. That will be bringing down some snow with it here, especially with those colder temperatures on Tuesday. But as we get into the middle of next week, on Wednesday, February 22nd, we'll still see the higher elevation snows out here, and even up across the Dakotas, Nebraska, and Wyoming here as well. We'll be breaking out with some moderate to heavy snow, but we're as warm enough in the 60s, 70s, and even can't even rule out a couple of 80s down here. It'll be all liquid precipitation from the southern plains to the central plains on eastward, and we could even be talking about some stronger thunderstorms as well, especially with those warmer temperatures on Wednesday. And then by the time we get into Thursday, it's all about that winter storm all across the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes, and then extending farther east into parts of New England. And I'm also a little bit concerned about an ice storm setup with this as well, somewhere across the Midwest here from Iowa, southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, extending across southern and central lower Michigan, and then farther east here into parts of upstate New York. But looking at the snowfall map here and what the models are showing with that, the European forecast guidance is consistent, showing over 6 inches of snow, perhaps up to a foot in some areas here across the upper Midwest through Minnesota, Wisconsin, the Dakotas, maybe as far south as Nebraska, Iowa, and then moving over through Michigan here, and then parts of upstate New England. But as we go here, looking at the GFS model, it's a little bit farther north with the track, but still showing those 6+ inch amounts and also a foot of snow up here again across the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and this time a little farther north into southeastern Canada. So Ontario and Quebec, Canada, getting in on the heaviest snowfall. And you can see the snowstorm probability next week is growing, actually in this lighter blue shaded color from central Wisconsin, back across southern Minnesota, far northern Iowa, getting back into northern Nebraska, and South Dakota especially. We will be seeing a 70% chance of a snowstorm next week, and even some orange and red showing up here, so a 90% chance of a snowstorm, especially into eastern South Dakota and southwestern Minnesota, getting through the week next week. But like I said, we have to be concerned about an ice storm, I think, with this next setup going into next week, especially during that Wednesday and Thursday time frame as that moisture moves up over top of that shallow cold air. We're definitely going to have to concern ourselves about rainfall falling on contact and then refreezing here once it hits the ground. So that will be something as we go through next week we could be concerned about. Looking at the GFS here, the ice amounts here does look to place that across northern Iowa, southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, and then all across over there towards southern lower Michigan and parts of New England, including the Detroit area, Milwaukee, and then back toward Des Moines. The Canadian model, or the GDPS model for ice, has that a little bit farther south. So this time here, the Davenport Quad Cities, Rockford, Illinois, Chicago, and then farther east there toward Gary, Indiana, Detroit, and then maybe even getting over there into Buffalo and Syracuse, New York as well. So we'll keep an eye on this going into next week. Changes are expected with the track of this system. But looking here at the severe weather side of the system, dew points will be rising in a big way across that deep warm sector here across the south and the southeast. Dew points will be rising well through the 60s on Wednesday, and then that will push eastward with the cold front on Thursday here, especially with those deeper moisture values with dew points in the mid-60s across the Gulf Coast and the southeast on up into the Carolinas on Thursday. Looking at the Colorado State Machine Learning severe weather probabilities, looking at middle and late portion of next week, it does look like Wednesday does stand the chance to see at least a slight risk for severe weather somewhere across the Arklatex, getting up here into the Tennessee and Ohio river valleys. And then as that cold front slowly pushes off to the east late next week on Thursday the 23rd, we could be seeing more of a marginal to slight risk of severe weather farther east. This could be including much of the southeast and even the Carolinas, and maybe farther north into the mid-Atlantic with that deep warm sector for the severe weather on Thursday. But like I said and mentioned in yesterday's video, we actually do have a sudden stratospheric warming event, and actually a major sudden stratospheric warming event that did take place just the other day. today, and it does take a couple of weeks before we start to see this cold air move down from the stratosphere into where we live in the troposphere. But looking here at the heights here, the geopotential heights, and this is a kind of a look at the stratosphere above where we live, and you can see today the polar vortex does look pretty organized. So that means it has all the cold air bottled up to the north, because whenever you see these spokes of energy pretty organized, kind of like a bowling ball, you don't really see the cold air dropping south. But now it changes, though. As we get into the middle and late portion of next week, you start to see the jet stream become a little bit more erratic here around the polar vortex, and you start to see these lobes of cold air pushing farther south across Alaska, across the northwestern United States. But by the time we get to late February and probably even heading into the first week in March, look at all these spokes of energy here starting to erupt along the leading edge and the outer edge of the polar vortex here. So it starts to get a little bit disorganized, which means all this cold air will be dislodged farther south towards southern Canada and eventually parts of the northern and northwestern U.S. to end the month of February and move into early March. And that is exactly what the Climate Prediction Center is forecasting from February 25th here through the end of the month, getting into the first few days of March on March 3rd. Below normal temperatures favored out here across the west coast and the northwest, with that southeast ridge remaining intact across the southeast here through that time frame. But as we go a little bit farther into March here, through at least the middle of March here, the first and second weeks in March, it does look predominantly colder up across the northern plains, the upper Midwest, and the Pacific Northwest, and that could even extend over eastward through the New England region as well, with that ridge actually becoming a little less prevalent across the southeast. Will start to dampen the ridge farther south toward the Gulf of Mexico. So some of this cold air will be moving farther south into the first and second weeks into March. And to prove that here, the temperature trends do show you that late February, we're going to still see some colder temperatures across the north, but not overly cold. All the real cold stuff will be up here across the Arctics, and we still have a bit of that southeast ridge toward the end of the month. But as we get into March 7th, that first full week into March, we start to see that with that sudden stratospheric warming event, some of that cold air will be pushing farther south. Remember, it takes about 10 to 14 days for this to transfer from the stratosphere down to the troposphere where we live, and by the time we get into early March here on March 7th, we'll begin to feel the effects of that across the Pacific Northwest, the northern plains, and the upper Midwest, still with that southeast ridge across the southeast and even down into Florida at that time. But by the time we get into the second week in March now, around the March 12th time frame, much more of the deeper cold air will push farther south, and this time it could be more potent down into the Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma, Kansas, and even Missouri as well, farther south. And you can see that ridge across the southeast that we've had all winter long, it seems, will start to disappear here and actually dampen its way farther south towards Florida and the immediate Gulf Coast by that time. Also with that, with the colder air moving in from the north, we have to look at the snow depth trends as well. Again, the trend is your friend here, and February 27th, all of the heavy snows will be falling up to the north. There's no doubt about that. All the heavy snows will be up here into the northern plains, the upper Midwest, and the Great Lakes regions, and parts of upstate here, New England as well. But as we get into the first week in March, we'll start to see some changes occur with the difference in the jet stream, with that sudden stratospheric warming event taking shape here, and seeing all the colder air pushing farther south. That means with any precipitation, this will be snowfall, and across the Rockies and even farther south here into Nebraska, Kansas, and Colorado through March 7th, we'll start to see more snow. And then that actually builds farther south by the time we get into the second week in March, around the March 12th time frame, with more snow for Kansas, Missouri, maybe as far south as North Texas and the Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and that could even push farther east through the Ohio Valley, the Mid-Atlantic, and parts of the Carolinas even, if we have cold enough air getting in towards the middle of March. But the good news is with this setup is that if we do have some heavy snow across the center of the country, this will start to, slowly begin to help out with the drought that we've been seeing across the central plains from Nebraska through Kansas, through Oklahoma and Texas as well, and really all across the West. So hopefully we can get some precipitation over the next couple of weeks to start to alleviate the drought across this part of the country. Well, to recap my weather forecast for you guys, a brilliant brilliant weekend of weather with mild temperatures and quiet weather. Do get outside and enjoy the nice mild temperatures if you live in one of those areas across the eastern two-thirds of the country. But a big storm moves in next week. Again, we go back to reality here with a snowstorm, an ice storm, and possible severe weather, especially across the south. And then looking at the long-range weather pattern with that sudden stratospheric warming event, I think the cold air moves back southward here across much of the country and towards that second week in March and toward the middle of March. And that snow line will also push farther south as well across most areas that haven't seen a lot of snow. We'll see some opportunities for snow towards the middle of March. Well, thanks everybody for watching. Definitely appreciate it. If you liked the video, press the thumbs up down below. Leave any comments, questions, and concerns below. I'll get to those later on today. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're new, and hit the notification bell to get all of my daily weather forecast updates on this channel. Have a great Saturday, everybody. A great rest of your weekend, and I will see you all in the next video.